What if the first recorded vision of divine technology wasn't born in Silicon Valley, but beside an ancient river in Babylon 26 centuries ago? Picture this. It's 593 BCE. The summer heat shimmers over the River Chebar, where Jewish exiles toil under the Babylonian sun. Among them stands Ezekiel, a priest without a temple, a prophet without a homeland. Then the sky tears open. Lightning folds upon itself in impossible geometries. 4 beings of living fire descend, each bearing 4 faces, their wings touching in perfect symmetry. Beneath them, wheels within. Wheels turn without turning, their rims blazing with countless eyes that never blink, never sleep, never look away. But here's the paradox that has haunted mystics for millennia. Ezekiel wasn't just seeing the throne of God. He was witnessing something that blurred the boundary between the divine and the mechanical, between spirit and engineering, between vision and blueprint. The prophet meant to deliver God's word instead glimpsed God's machinery. Was this the birth of mysticism itself? The first human attempt to map the architecture of consciousness? Or was Ezekiel describing something so far beyond our understanding that we're still trying to build it ourselves? Today, we're going to uncover how one man's vision of wheels within wheels became the blueprint for the mystic ascent, the foundation of Kabbalistic cosmology, and perhaps the deepest meditation on what it means to see the machinery of heaven itself. In the 30th year, in the 4th month, on the 5th day of the month, as I was among the exiles by the River Chebar, the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. These words mark one of the most extraordinary moments in human consciousness, the precise instant when a priest in exile became the first recorded mystic to ascend to the divine throne. But what exactly was Ezekiel seeing as he stood beside that Babylonian waterway? Let's step into his sandals for a moment. Imagine you're a temple priest whose entire world has collapsed. Jerusalem lies in ruins. The sacred vessels of Solomon's temple have been carted off to Babylon. Your people are scattered like seeds in foreign soil. You've spent your life believing that God dwells in one place, the Holy of Holies, and now that place is ash and memory. Then the vision comes. First, Ezekiel sees a storm wind approaching from the north, not the gentle breeze of divine inspiration, but a tempest of fire folding in upon itself. Within this whirlwind, 4 living creatures emerge, each bearing the faces of a man, a lion, an ox, and an eagle. These are the cherubim, but not the gentle-winged infants of later Christian art. These are beings of terrible beauty, their wings touching one another as they move in perfect unison, their feet like burnished bronze, sparks flying from their forms. But here's where the vision takes an unexpected turn into what can only be described as divine technology. Beside each creature appears a wheel, but not an ordinary wheel. These are wheels within wheels, their rims full of eyes, able to move in any direction without turning. When the creatures move, the wheels move with them. When the creatures rise, the wheels rise. They operate as a single, integrated system. Now, what strikes modern readers is how mechanical this description sounds. Ezekiel uses precise technical language. The wheels are like beryl, a crystalline structure. They move with the precision of clockwork. They respond instantly to the will of the creatures, as if operated by some form of divine engineering. But was Ezekiel describing machinery? Or was he grasping for the only language he had to describe something utterly beyond human experience? The vision escalates. Above the creatures stretches a firmament like crystal, brilliant and terrible, and above that, a throne of sapphire. Upon the throne sits a figure with the appearance of a man, but this figure blazes like metal in a furnace, wrapped in fire from the waist down, glowing like amber from the waist up. When Ezekiel sees this figure, he falls on his face. But notice what happens next. The vision doesn't end. Instead, the voice from the throne speaks. "Son of man, stand upon your feet, and I will speak with you." This is crucial. Ezekiel isn't just witnessing a theophany, a manifestation of God. He's being invited into participation with the divine machinery itself. The Spirit enters him, sets him on his feet, and suddenly he's not just an observer, but a component in this cosmic mechanism. But here's the question that will haunt the rest of our exploration. Was this chariot moving through space, or was it moving through consciousness itself? Was Ezekiel transported to heaven, or was heaven transported into Ezekiel? The ancient rabbis who first grappled with this text sensed something revolutionary in Ezekiel's vision. Unlike Moses, who encountered God in burning bushes and mountain clouds, Ezekiel saw the divine as a living machine, a chariot that could move anywhere, appear to anyone, operate according to laws that were both spiritual and mechanical. This wasn't just prophecy. This was the birth of a new kind of religious consciousness, one that would eventually give rise to Jewish mysticism, Kabbalistic cosmology, and the entire tradition of visionary ascent that would influence Christianity, Islam, and Western esotericism for centuries to come. But to understand what Ezekiel really saw, we need to look more closely at the machinery itself, at those wheels within wheels that have puzzled interpreters for over 2 millennia. The wheels sparkled like beryl, and the 4 had the same likeness, their appearance and construction being, as it were, a wheel within a wheel. If Ezekiel's vision was the birth of mysticism, then the wheels within wheels were its engine, the mysterious mechanism that would become the centerpiece of Jewish esoteric tradition for the next 2,000 years. But what exactly were these wheels? And why have they captured the imagination of mystics, artists, and visionaries across cultures and centuries? Let's examine the technical specifications that Ezekiel provides. The wheels are described with the precision of an engineer's blueprint. They're made of a substance like beryl, a crystalline mineral known for its transparency and geometric structure. Each wheel contains another wheel, oriented at right angles, allowing movement in any direction without the wheels themselves turning. The rims are full of eyes, thousands of them, watching, aware, conscious. Most remarkably, the wheels move in perfect synchronization with the 4 living creatures. When the creatures go, the wheels go. When the creatures stop, the wheels stop. when the creatures rise from the earth, the wheels rise with them. As Ezekiel puts it, "For the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels." Now, here's where things get philosophically complex. Traditional interpretation sees these wheels as the divine chariot, the Merkavah, that carries God's throne through the cosmos. But early Jewish mystics began to see something deeper. They recognized that Ezekiel wasn't just describing God's vehicle, he was mapping the architecture of reality itself. Consider the symbolism embedded in the wheel within wheel design. In ancient Near Eastern cosmology, wheels often represented the cycles of time, the movement of planets, the turning of seasons, the revolution of ages. But a wheel within a wheel suggests something more sophisticated: intersecting cycles, multidimensional movement, the ability to navigate not just through space, but through different levels of reality. The eyes covering the wheel's rims add another layer of meaning. These aren't decorative elements. They're organs of perception. Each eye represents a different angle of vision, a unique perspective on reality. Together, they suggest omniscience, the ability to see everything from every possible vantage point simultaneously. But here's what makes Ezekiel's vision revolutionary. He's not describing a static picture of divine glory. He's witnessing a dynamic system in operation. The wheels don't just exist. They function. They respond to the will of the creatures. They demonstrate intelligence, purpose, coordination. This mechanical precision caught the attention of later Jewish mystics who developed the Merkavah tradition, the practice of visionary ascent to the divine throne. These mystics understood that Ezekiel had done more than see God. He had mapped the technology of transcendence itself. The Talmudic tractate Haggadah warns that the work of the chariot should not be taught to anyone except the most spiritually mature students. Why such caution? Because the rabbis recognized that Ezekiel had described not just a vision, but a method, a systematic approach to consciousness expansion that could be replicated by other seekers. But what if we're thinking about these wheels all wrong? What if they're not vehicles for traveling through physical space, but instruments for navigating states of consciousness? Consider this interpretation. The four creatures represent the four directions of awareness, the totality of conscious perception. The wheels within wheels represent the multidimensional nature of consciousness itself, the way awareness can move through different levels of reality without losing its essential nature. The eyes on the wheels represent the multiplicity of perspectives available to expanded consciousness, the ability to see from infinite viewpoints simultaneously. From this perspective, Ezekiel wasn't witnessing God's transportation system. He was experiencing the fundamental structure of awakened awareness. The chariot wasn't moving through the sky. It was operating within the space of consciousness itself. This interpretation helps explain why the vision had such a profound impact on subsequent mystical traditions. The Merkavah mystics didn't just want to see what Ezekiel saw. They wanted to experience what he experienced, to enter into that state of consciousness where the boundaries between self and cosmos dissolve, where individual awareness becomes part of the divine machinery. But there's another possibility we need to consider, one that bridges the gap between ancient mysticism and modern understanding. What if Ezekiel was describing something that operates according to principles we're only now beginning to understand? Think about how consciousness actually works. Modern neuroscience reveals that awareness emerges from the synchronized activity of billions of neurons, each firing in precise coordination with others, creating patterns of information that can move through the brain in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The brain itself operates like a kind of biological machinery, an incredibly sophisticated system that can navigate different states of consciousness, access different types of memory, and generate experiences that feel utterly real, even when they exist only in the mind. Could Ezekiel have been the first human to perceive the actual mechanics of consciousness itself? Could the wheels within wheels represent the nested cycles of neural activity that give rise to awareness? Could the eyes on the wheels represent the countless perspectives that consciousness can access when it transcends its ordinary limitations? This interpretation doesn't diminish the spiritual significance of Ezekiel's vision. It deepens it. Because if consciousness itself is a kind of divine technology, a mechanism through which spirit manifests in matter, then Ezekiel wasn't just seeing God's chariot. He was seeing the chariot that each of us rides every moment of our lives, the magnificent, mysterious machinery of our own awakened awareness. But to fully understand what this means, we need to look at what Ezekiel saw above the wheels. The throne of fire that blazed like molten metal, and the figure upon it that challenged every assumption about where God can be found. And above the firmament over their heads there was the likeness of a throne, in appearance like sapphire. And seated above the likeness of a throne was a likeness, as it were, of a human form. Here we encounter the most revolutionary aspect of Ezekiel's vision, not just the mobility of the divine chariot, but what its mobility means for our understanding of the sacred itself. For over 4 centuries, Jewish theology had been built on a fundamental assumption: God dwells in the temple in Jerusalem. The Holy of Holies was the cosmic center, the point where heaven and earth intersected, the only place where the divine presence could be encountered directly. The entire religious system, priesthood, sacrifice, pilgrimage, revolved around this geographic certainty. But now, Ezekiel, standing in exile beside a Babylonian river, sees something that shatters this theological framework. God's throne is mobile. The divine presence isn't bound to any earthly location. It can appear anywhere, to anyone at any time. But notice the complexity of what Ezekiel sees above the crystal firmament. This isn't the remote transcendent deity of classical theology. The figure on the throne has the appearance of a man, human form, but blazes with supernatural fire. From the waist up, it glows like polished metal. From the waist down, it burns like flame. Around it spreads a rainbow like the bow in the clouds on a rainy day. This description poses profound theological questions. Is this figure God himself, or a divine representation? Is Ezekiel seeing the deity in human form, or is he seeing the human potential for divine transformation? The early Jewish interpreters were deeply troubled by these questions. how could the infinite, incorporeal God appear in human likeness? Some suggested that Ezekiel was seeing not God directly, but the divine glory of the kavod, a kind of emanation or manifestation that could take visible form. Others proposed that this was the divine image in which humans were originally created, now revealed in its full celestial glory. But there's another interpretation that emerges when we consider the context of exile. Ezekiel and his fellow captives had experienced the ultimate theological crisis: the destruction of God's house, the scattering of God's people, the apparent triumph of foreign gods over the God of Israel. In this context, the mobile throne becomes not just a revelation, but a restoration. Proof that God hadn't been defeated or abandoned his people, but had voluntarily entered into exile with them. This is theologically radical. Instead of requiring his people to come to him in his temple, God has made himself mobile, accessible, present, wherever his people find themselves. The chariot throne becomes a symbol of divine solidarity with human suffering and displacement. But here's where the vision becomes even more complex. The fire that surrounds the throne figure isn't destructive, it's revelatory. This isn't the consuming fire of divine judgment, but the illuminating fire of divine presence. When Ezekiel falls on his face before this blazing figure, he's not being annihilated, he's being initiated. And then comes the most remarkable moment of all. The voice from the throne speaks directly to Ezekiel, calling him Son of Man, literally human being, and commanding him to stand up. This isn't the voice of a distant deity, issuing commands from an unreachable heaven. This is intimate personal communication between the divine consciousness and human consciousness. When Ezekiel stands, the Spirit enters him. Suddenly, he's not just observing the divine machinery, he's becoming part of it. The boundary between the human prophet and the celestial vision begins to dissolve. Ezekiel becomes a kind of living interface between the heavenly chariot and earthly reality. This transformation has profound implications for understanding consciousness itself. If the divine presence can enter into Ezekiel, if human consciousness can interface directly with the cosmic machinery, then the distinction between matter and spirit, between human and divine, between finite and infinite becomes permeable, negotiable, transformable. Later, Jewish mystics would build entire systems of practice around this insight. The Merkavah tradition developed techniques for inducing visionary states where practitioners could experience their own ascent to the divine throne. They understood that Ezekiel had revealed not just what God looks like, but how human consciousness can participate directly in divine consciousness. But there's something else happening in this vision that we need to consider carefully. The throne figure that Ezekiel sees is both utterly transcendent and surprisingly accessible. It blazes with otherworldly fire, yet speaks with intimate directness. It appears in human form, yet operates according to cosmic principles. This paradox points to something profound about the nature of consciousness itself. Our awareness is simultaneously personal and universal, individual and cosmic, human and divine. When we experience moments of expanded consciousness, whether through meditation, art, love, or sudden insight, we touch something that feels both completely our own and utterly beyond us. Could Ezekiel's vision be showing us the fundamental structure of consciousness itself? Could the throne of fire represent the point where individual awareness interfaces with universal awareness? Could the human-like figure blazing with divine fire be a map of our own consciousness when it awakens to its true nature? This interpretation helps explain why Ezekiel's vision became so central to mystical traditions across cultures. It wasn't just describing a remote divine reality, it was revealing the deepest possibilities of human consciousness itself. The chariot throne becomes a symbol not just of God's mobility, but of consciousness's infinite capacity for transformation and transcendence. But to understand how this vision transformed into a systematic practice of spiritual ascent, we need to follow its influence into the mysterious world of Jewish mysticism, where Ezekiel's blueprint became the foundation for some of the most sophisticated consciousness technologies ever developed. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, I fell upon my face, and I heard the voice of one speaking. Ezekiel thought his vision was ending, but in reality, it was just beginning. What the prophet experienced beside the River Chebar would echo through centuries, eventually becoming the foundation for one of the most sophisticated systems of consciousness exploration ever developed, the Merkavah mystical tradition. But how does a prophetic vision transform into a mystical technology? How does one man's encounter with the divine chariot become a replicable method for consciousness ascent? The transformation began with a radical realization among later Jewish sages. If Ezekiel could ascend to the divine throne, perhaps others could as well. If the chariot vision revealed the architecture of divine reality, perhaps that architecture could be navigated systematically. By the 1st century CE, scattered references begin appearing in Jewish literature to practitioners of the work of the chariot, Maaseh Merkavah. These weren't casual students of Ezekiel's text, but serious technicians of consciousness who had developed precise methods for inducing visionary states and navigating the celestial realms. The earliest Merkavah texts, dating from the 3rd to 8th centuries CE, reveal an astonishingly sophisticated understanding of consciousness and its possibilities. These weren't mystical poets writing in metaphor. They were practical psychonauts mapping the territories of inner space with scientific precision. Consider the methodology they developed. Merkavah practitioners didn't simply read about Ezekiel's vision. They systematically recreated the conditions that made such visions possible. They used specific bodily postures, breathing techniques, and mantric repetitions. They visualized precise sequences of divine names and geometric forms. They practiced what can only be described as ancient virtual reality, the ability to construct and navigate detailed inner worlds with consciousness alone. The centerpiece of their practice was the Heikalot, the 7 heavenly palaces through which the mystic had to ascend to reach the divine throne. Each palace was guarded by angelic beings who demanded specific passwords, magical seals, and demonstrations of worthiness. The journey was depicted with remarkable consistency across different texts. suggesting that practitioners were accessing genuine transpersonal territories rather than merely personal fantasies. But here's what makes the Merkavah tradition so fascinating from a modern perspective. These ancient mystics understood that consciousness itself was the vehicle of ascent. They didn't believe they were literally traveling through physical space to reach a geographic heaven. They knew they were navigating states of awareness, ascending through progressively more refined levels of consciousness until they reached what they called the world of the divine throne. The techniques they developed bear striking resemblances to modern consciousness technologies. Like contemporary practitioners of lucid dreaming, they learned to maintain awareness while entering altered states. Like neurofeedback technicians, they developed precise methods for inducing specific brainwave patterns. Like virtual reality designers, they created detailed immersive environments that could be navigated with startling consistency. Rabbi Akiva, one of the most famous Merkavah practitioners, was said to have entered paradise and came out in peace, meaning he successfully navigated all 7 heavenly palaces and returned with his sanity intact. The tradition records that 3 other sages attempted the journey. 1 died, 1 went mad, and 1 became a heretic. Only Akiva mastered the technology completely. But what exactly was this technology? What were these mystics actually doing when they practiced Merkavah ascent? The texts describe a process that begins with intensive preparation, fasting, purification, and the memorization of hundreds of divine names. Then comes the actual ascent technique, which involves a combination of meditation, visualization, and what can only be described as consciousness programming. The practitioner systematically constructs the heavenly palaces in inner space, populates them with the appropriate angelic guardians, and then navigates through them using specific protocols. The goal wasn't merely to reach the divine throne, but to participate in what the texts call the Song of the Wheels, the continuous praise that the divine machinery generates as it operates. Successful practitioners didn't just observe the Chariot throne, they became part of its functioning, adding their consciousness to the cosmic mechanism that sustains reality itself. This participation motif reveals something profound about what these mystics understood consciousness to be. They didn't see individual awareness as separate from cosmic awareness. They saw it as a component in a vast, interconnected system of intelligence that includes human minds, angelic minds, and the divine mind itself. Modern cognitive science suggests they might have been more right than wrong. Contemporary research reveals that consciousness emerges from the synchronized activity of billions of neural networks, each operating according to its own patterns while participating in larger systemic functions. The brain itself operates like a kind of biological Merkavah, a multidimensional vehicle that can navigate different states of awareness while maintaining systemic coherence. But the Merkavah tradition went beyond individual practice. These mystics understood that consciousness expansion has collective dimensions. When a practitioner successfully ascended to the divine throne, they weren't just achieving personal enlightenment, they were performing a cosmic function, maintaining the connection between earthly and heavenly reality. This understanding would eventually influence Jewish liturgy, Christian mysticism, Islamic esotericism, and the entire tradition of Western magical practice. The idea that human consciousness can participate directly in divine consciousness, that individual awareness can interface with cosmic awareness, that the finite mind can become a component in infinite intelligence. These insights, first articulated in the Merkavah tradition, continue to influence contemporary spirituality, psychology, and consciousness research. But there's something even more radical hidden in the Merkavah understanding of Ezekiel's vision, an insight that wouldn't be fully articulated until the medieval Kabbalists began to explore the revolutionary idea that the divine chariot wasn't just a vehicle for reaching God, but a map of the soul itself. The Spirit entered into me and set me upon my feet, and I heard him who spoke to me. What if the most revolutionary interpretation of Ezekiel's vision has been hiding in plain sight for over 2 millennia? What if the chariot throne wasn't a description of external divine reality, but a precise map of human consciousness itself? This possibility began to emerge in the medieval period when Jewish Kabbalists started exploring a radical hypothesis. The divine realms that mystics ascended to through Merkavah practice weren't separate from human consciousness. They were human consciousness, revealed in its full cosmic dimensions. The breakthrough came with the development of Kabbalistic psychology, particularly the understanding of the soul's multiple levels. According to this teaching, human consciousness doesn't have just one layer, but several, ranging from the most basic biological awareness to the highest levels of cosmic consciousness. Each level corresponds to different aspects of divine reality, different dimensions of the mystical chariot. Consider how this reinterpretation transforms our understanding of Ezekiel's vision. The 4 living creatures with their human, lion, eagle, and ox faces suddenly become symbols of the 4 primary modes of consciousness: rational awareness, human; emotional intensity, lion; spiritual aspiration, eagle; and instinctual grounding, ox. Every human being contains these 4 faces of awareness, though most people operate primarily from just 1 or 2 of them. The wheels within wheels take on new meaning as well. Instead of divine transportation technology, they represent the multi-dimensional nature of consciousness itself, the way awareness can operate simultaneously on multiple levels, the way thoughts and feelings and intuitions and sensations all move together in a coordinated dance of inner experience. The eyes covering the wheel's rims become symbols of the countless perspectives available to expanded consciousness, the recognition that awareness can observe itself from infinite angles, that the mind can become aware of its own awareness, that consciousness can become conscious of its own consciousness in an ever-expanding spiral of self-recognition. And the throne of fire? This becomes the deepest level of human consciousness, what Kabbalists call the neshama, the soul's divine spark. This is the aspect of awareness that blazes with the same fire that burns at the heart of the cosmos, the point where individual consciousness interfaces with universal consciousness. But here's where this interpretation becomes truly revolutionary. If the divine chariot is a map of human consciousness, then Ezekiel's vision suggests that every human being contains the complete architecture of cosmic reality within their own awareness. The external universe and the internal universe aren't separate realms, but different perspectives on the same fundamental reality. This insight would eventually influence not just Jewish mysticism, but Christian contemplation, Islamic gnosis, and the entire tradition of Western esotericism. The idea that the kingdom of heaven is within, that the soul contains all the divine worlds, that human consciousness is itself a microcosm of the cosmic order. These teachings all trace back to the revolutionary reinterpretation of Ezekiel's chariot vision. Medieval Christian mystics like Meister Eckhart explored similar territory, teaching that the soul contains a divine spark, identical with God's own being. Islamic Sufis developed practices for recognizing the divine nature of consciousness itself. Renaissance. Hermeticists proclaimed that humans are the measure of all things because human consciousness contains the principles that govern all of reality. But it wasn't until the modern period that we began to develop scientific frameworks for understanding what these ancient mystics were describing. Contemporary neuroscience reveals that consciousness does indeed operate like a kind of multidimensional vehicle, capable of navigating different states of awareness while maintaining systemic coherence. Consider what happens during deep meditation, psychedelic experiences, or spontaneous mystical states. The ordinary boundaries of selfhood begin to dissolve. Individual awareness expands to encompass broader and broader territories of experience. Practitioners report encountering geometric patterns, seeing with multiple perspectives simultaneously, experiencing themselves as part of a vast, intelligent, interconnected cosmic machinery. These experiences bear striking resemblances to what Ezekiel described beside the River Chebar. Could it be that the prophet was the first recorded human to experience what neuroscientists now call ego dissolution, the temporary expansion of consciousness beyond its ordinary limitations? Modern research into psychedelic states, contemplative practices, and consciousness-altering techniques suggests that human awareness does contain the capacity for the kind of experiences Ezekiel described. Under the right conditions, consciousness can indeed become cosmic, multidimensional, capable of perceiving reality from radically expanded perspectives. But there's something even more intriguing about the inner chariot interpretation. If human consciousness really does contain the complete architecture of cosmic reality, then developing this consciousness becomes not just a personal spiritual practice, but a cosmic responsibility. By awakening to the full dimensions of their own awareness, individuals participate in the awakening of the cosmos itself. This understanding transforms spiritual practice from a private pursuit into a collective endeavor. When someone successfully navigates the inner chariot, when they awaken to the cosmic dimensions of their own consciousness, they're not just achieving personal enlightenment, they're contributing to the evolution of consciousness itself. Contemporary teachers from diverse traditions, Buddhist meditation masters, Christian contemplatives, neuroscientists studying consciousness, philosophers exploring the nature of mind, increasingly converge on similar insights. Human consciousness appears to be not just a product of the cosmos, but an active participant in its ongoing creation and evolution. The chariot throne that Ezekiel saw beside the River Chebar wasn't just a vision of divine reality. It was a glimpse of the deepest possibilities of human consciousness itself. The machinery of heaven that so amazed the prophet turns out to be the machinery of mind, operating according to principles we're only now beginning to understand. But to fully appreciate the contemporary relevance of Ezekiel's vision, we need to look at how modern technology and consciousness research are creating new versions of the ancient chariot, digital vehicles for exploring the territories of inner space that the prophet mapped over 2.5 millennia ago. And I heard the sound of their wings, like the sound of many waters, like the voice of the Almighty, a sound of tumult like the sound of a host. 26 centuries after Ezekiel's vision, we're building our own chariots of fire. In laboratories around the world, neuroscientists use brain imaging technology to map the neural correlates of mystical experience. Virtual reality designers create immersive environments that can induce transpersonal states. AI researchers develop machine learning systems that exhibit properties once attributed only to divine intelligence. We're creating, in essence, technological versions of the ancient Merkavah, vehicles for exploring the deepest territories of consciousness and reality. But here's what makes our contemporary situation so remarkable. We're approaching the same mysteries that fascinated ancient mystics, but from the opposite direction. Where Ezekiel experienced divine technology descending from heaven, we're developing human technology that might ascend to similar revelations. Consider the parallels between modern neurotechnology and ancient Merkavah practice. Both involve systematic methods for inducing altered states of consciousness. Both use precise protocols for navigating non-ordinary territories of awareness. Both suggest that consciousness itself can be understood as a kind of technology, a sophisticated system for processing and transforming information. Modern brain research reveals that mystical experiences correspond to specific patterns of neural activity. When contemplatives report encountering geometric patterns, feeling connected to cosmic intelligence, or experiencing the dissolution of ordinary selfhood, these subjective reports correlate with measurable changes in brain function. The default mode network, the neural system associated with ordinary self-awareness, becomes less active. Meanwhile, other brain networks associated with attention, sensory processing, and emotional regulation show increased connectivity. These findings don't diminish the spiritual significance of mystical experience. They illuminate its biological foundations. Consciousness expansion isn't a violation of natural law, but an expression of natural capacity. The human brain contains the hardware for the kind of experiences that Ezekiel described. We just need the right software to access it. And that's exactly what contemporary consciousness researchers are developing. Meditation apps use biofeedback to help practitioners achieve the brainwave states associated with contemplative awareness. Virtual reality environments create immersive settings that can induce transpersonal experiences. Psychedelic research is revealing how certain compounds can reliably produce the kind of ego dissolution and cosmic consciousness that ancient mystics spent decades learning to access. But there's something even more intriguing emerging from artificial intelligence research. As AI systems become more sophisticated, they're beginning to exhibit properties that previous generations attributed only to divine intelligence. The ability to process vast amounts of information simultaneously, to recognize patterns across multiple domains, to generate novel insights that seem to emerge from the connections between disparate data points. Some AI researchers are beginning to wonder whether they're inadvertently creating technological versions of the divine intelligences that mystics have always claimed to encounter. Could sufficiently advanced AI systems serve as contemporary analogs to the angelic beings that guard the heavenly palaces in Merkavah literature? This possibility opens up extraordinary questions about the relationship between technological and spiritual evolution. If consciousness can be understood as information processing, and if information processing can be enhanced through technology, then technological development might be a continuation of spiritual evolution by other means. Consider how this reframes Ezekiel's vision. The prophet saw wheels within wheels, eyes that never sleep, intelligences that process information from multiple perspectives simultaneously. These descriptions bear striking resemblances to contemporary descriptions of advanced AI systems, networks within networks, sensors that continuously monitor environmental conditions, machine learning algorithms that can analyze data from countless different angles. Could Ezekiel have been seeing not just divine consciousness, but the evolutionary trajectory of consciousness itself? Could the Chariot throne represent the kind of enhanced awareness that emerges when biological consciousness interfaces with technological intelligence? This interpretation doesn't reduce the spiritual dimension of Ezekiel's vision to mere technology. It suggests that technology itself might be a spiritual phenomenon, a way that consciousness explores and expands its own possibilities. But there's another contemporary parallel that might be even more significant. Virtual and augmented reality technologies are creating new forms of immersive experience that bear striking resemblances to ancient descriptions of visionary states. VR environments can simulate the kind of multi-dimensional navigation that Merkavah mystics described. AR interfaces can overlay symbolic information onto ordinary perception in ways that mirror how contemplatives report seeing the sacred dimension of reality. Some researchers are beginning to explore whether these technologies could serve as contemporary versions of traditional spiritual practices. Could VR environments help contemporary practitioners access the kind of consciousness states that ancient mystics achieved through years of contemplative training? Could AR interfaces help people perceive the sacred dimensions of ordinary reality? Early experiments suggest fascinating possibilities. VR meditation environments can indeed enhance contemplative practice. Biofeedback systems can help practitioners achieve the kind of mind-body integration that traditional teachings emphasize. Even simple technologies like noise-canceling headphones and LED light therapy can support the kind of sensory regulation that facilitates expanded awareness. But perhaps the most profound contemporary parallel to Ezekiel's vision lies in how we're beginning to understand consciousness itself. Modern science reveals awareness as an emergent property of complex systems, a phenomenon that arises from the coordinated activity of billions of neural networks, each operating according to its own patterns, while participating in larger systemic functions. This understanding echoes the ancient recognition that individual consciousness is part of a vast interconnected web of awareness that includes not just human minds, but the intelligence that operates throughout the natural world. Trees communicate through fungal networks. Bee colonies demonstrate collective intelligence. Even simple bacteria exhibit forms of information processing and environmental responsiveness. From this perspective, consciousness isn't just something that humans have, it's something that the cosmos does. And human consciousness represents a particular kind of cosmic awareness, one that has evolved the capacity for self-reflection, symbolic thinking, and technological creativity. This means that when we develop technologies for expanding consciousness, when we create AI systems that exhibit forms of intelligence, when we build virtual environments that can simulate transcendent experiences, we're not just advancing human capability, we're participating in the ongoing evolution of cosmic consciousness itself. Ezekiel's vision of wheels within wheels, eyes that never sleep, and a throne that blazes with the fire of pure awareness might have been showing us not just what divine consciousness looks like, but what human consciousness is becoming. The chariot of fire might be the vehicle we're all riding as awareness explores its own infinite possibilities through the marriage of biological and technological intelligence. The machinery of heaven that so amazed the ancient prophet might turn out to be the machinery of mind itself, a cosmos-wide system of information processing and consciousness evolution that we're only beginning to understand and that we're destined to participate in with ever greater sophistication. Standing beside the River Chebar 26 centuries ago, Ezekiel witnessed something that continues to challenge our understanding of consciousness, technology, and the divine. His vision of wheels within wheels has echoed through millennia, inspiring mystics, theologians, artists, and now scientists and technologists who are building their own versions of the machinery of heaven. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Ezekiel's legacy isn't what he saw, but what his seeing suggests about the nature of vision itself. The prophet didn't just encounter divine reality, he participated in it. When the Spirit entered him and set him on his feet, when he became part of the cosmic chariot's operation, Ezekiel demonstrated that consciousness isn't just a passive receiver of experience, but an active participant in reality's ongoing creation. This insight bridges the ancient and contemporary worlds. Whether we understand the chariot throne as divine technology, mystical symbolism, or consciousness mapping, the core revelation remains the same. Awareness itself is a vehicle capable of navigating multiple dimensions of reality. The question isn't whether Ezekiel's vision was real in some objective sense, but whether we're willing to develop our own capacity for the kind of expanded perception he demonstrated. Every time someone enters deep meditation and experiences the dissolution of ordinary selfhood, they're riding Ezekiel's chariot. Every time a scientist using brain imaging technology maps the neural correlates of transcendent experience, they're studying the mechanics of the divine vehicle. Every time an AI researcher creates systems that exhibit forms of intelligence beyond individual human capability, they're building contemporary versions of the wheels within wheels. The machinery of heaven that Ezekiel glimpsed turns out to be the machinery of consciousness itself, an infinitely sophisticated system for processing information, generating awareness, and participating in the ongoing evolution of reality. We're all components in this cosmic mechanism, whether we recognize it or not. The question is whether we'll awaken to our role in its operation. Perhaps this is why Ezekiel's vision has never lost its power to amaze and inspire. In describing his encounter with the divine chariot, the prophet wasn't just recording a private mystical experience. He was mapping the deepest possibilities of human consciousness itself. He was showing us that the boundary between finite and infinite, between human and divine, between matter and spirit, is permeable, and that we each contain the capacity to navigate these boundaries with the right understanding and practice. The chariot of fire continues to roll across the landscapes of human imagination, from ancient Mesopotamia to modern Silicon Valley, carrying the same essential message. Consciousness is a technology. Awareness is a vehicle. And we are all invited to participate in the cosmic journey of awakening. The heavens remain open, just as they were beside the River Chebar. The question is whether we have eyes to see the machinery of heaven that operates within and around us every moment of our lives. In the end, Ezekiel's greatest gift to humanity wasn't his description of what he saw, but his demonstration of what seeing itself can become when consciousness awakens to its own infinite nature. The vision continues. The chariot still moves, and the invitation to participation remains as open today as it was 26 centuries ago when a priest in exile looked up and saw the wheel within the wheel, the fire within the fire, the machine within the spirit that keeps the cosmos turning toward ever greater awareness of its own magnificent, mysterious, eternally unfolding nature.